formally named our daughter as we were called to the Torah at a small private ceremony on our apartment. Jennifer benched Gomel, which is a special blessing of appreciation for having successfully come through the challenges of pregnancy and childbirth. And as she held the Torah along with us, we gave our daughter the name Tess Meira Kenter. Tirza Meira Bat Doron Peretz V'Shem Lofreda. Tess is named for some very important people in our lives. We would now ask our parents, starting with Sue Pavane, to come up and share a few words about Tess's namesake.
Okay, Jerome, you can't make fun of me if I cry. You make fun of me all the time.
This is one time I'm going.
I've always been short. 1 minute. Our Tess Meira is named for my mother, Tessie Wilson. Tirza Baruch Mordechai HaKohen Afraid. But my mother, was always known as Grandma Tess and Aunt Tessie. She was born Tessie Roush on the Lower East Side in 1921. And one day, fairly later in life, I realized that the push carts that she spoke about, that she knew as a child, were pulled by horses down the streets of the Lower East Side. It was like a black and white photo came alive, and it was my mother's life. From there, they moved to the Bronx, Bryant Avenue and Jessup Avenue. And then when she married my father, Bob Wilson, they took the big leap, the big step, and moved to Queens, where my father had a family store called Wilson's Department Store. The part about my mother that I want to impart today is that she made a lot of people smile. She brought smiles to a lot of people's faces, very much like our little Tess brings smiles to our faces now. She made people smile by doing some funny things. She put a big flower on the top of the antenna of her car because she always lost it in the parking lots. She couldn't find our house, so she would go down the block. We would literally stand at the window and watch her go down the block, turn around, come back. And we lived there for 26 years. She had a very special routine with babies. She would take all of their hair in a little bow on the top. I have cousins here who are agreeing with this. And then she'd go, Adat Kepala, and make them bump heads. But she brought smiles to people's lives for a much more important reason, too. Just by being who she was. She had a warm, uplifting personality. She just connected with people well, and people really wanted to be with her. She wasn't an academic or an intellectual, but she had more seichel and more common sense than most people I know. My friends would call me up and say, Sue, could you ask your mother something? They needed some advice. She had friends from her whole life, both from the Lower East Side, from the Bronx, and from where we lived in Bayside. We lived in garden apartments in the Court in Bayside. And she kept them for her whole life. In fact, one friend she re-met when both my mother and this friend Millie became widows at a young age. And then Millie became a very big part of our lives. The Court was a wonderful place to grow up. Both Lenny, my brother, and I had wonderful growing up there. And I'm still friendly with some of the friends here at the Court. At Queens College, where my mother worked, she treated every student as if they were her own. She made sure they had all the right forms and papers, and it was a very close-knit office, and my mother was right in the middle of it. At her funeral, on the day of her funeral, they closed the financial aid office at Queens College during registration so everyone could attend. And they tell me they flew the flag at half-mast. My mother was devoted to her two sisters, together, Edna and Marion. Together they were the three Schwesters, and her brother. They were devoted to their parents, my grandparents, where we spent many, many Sundays visiting. And she developed an incredibly special relationship with her nieces and nephews. She was there to help and to hold every little baby that was born. And there's another one right there. Then when I was married and Howie and I started our own family, my mother was there to help, along with Roz and Larry. The grandparents were an incredibly big part of Brian and Jennifer's growing up. My mother was there when Brian was born, just as I've been able to help with Tess. We were always together. We were like a little gang. And I think Erin grew up thinking that Grandma Tess was her grandmother. My mother used to say, in our family, you can't tell the in-laws from the outlaws. And that was very true. On Thanksgiving, my mother always had more people than could fit in her apartment, and it was always wonderful. My mother set examples for me and for others to follow. She set, I think, the best example of how to connect and be with people. She used to say, for the same dime, because a phone call was a dime in those days, you might as well say something nice. She was bound by tradition, but she was open to new ideas and really modern in some ways. Brian pointed out that if Grandma Tess were here today, she would be beaming. But then Tess would have a different name. This week is my mother's website. And when I say kindness from my mother, very often, and people can verify this, I get a smile on my face. Because when I think of her, I think of all these wonderful parts. And now we have a little Tess to continue to bring a smile to all of our faces.